storyboard. Here we go. Okay, I found it.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So hopefully that'll work. We'll see you later. So you may not know that we've also won Emmy Awards for both of the technologies that I'll be introducing you to tonight. So Storyboard Pro is the pre-production storyboarding solution, and you can use Storyboard Pro to plan all kinds of productions, not just 2D animated productions. So we have, for example, some 3D productions, such as Lucasfilm doing their new Star Wars Rebels TV series. There's also some productions in the UK that have been boarded for 3D productions. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Boy and the Dinosaur, but there are definitely others as well. And then in the Harmony front, Harmony is a 2D animation software, but we also do some 3D in there as well. You can import 3D models in. And then our newest pipeline is also for gaming. And so if you're creating 2D games and using Unity as your game engine, then we have a solution to go from Harmony into Unity. And I'll talk to you more about that. We also won an Annie Award for the pipeline from Storyboard Pro to Harmony. And this one we're quite proud of because it was spearheaded by Cartoon Network. And so it's sort of our own peers telling us, hey, you're doing a good job. So I won't go over this in great detail because you already heard a lot of this information. So that we've been around for 20 years. We're present in 122 countries. And we are based in Montreal, although we do have various representatives like Lindsay who are around the world. And we are primarily in research and development. So we are constantly evolving. Our software is constantly evolving. We have quite a large team here devoted to creating new technology. And we do have presence in social media, and we like to connect together different companies who are creating projects so that you can co-produce together. There's just a star on every country that we're present on in the world here, so you can see that we are present all over the place. And I'll probably just skip through the rest of these guys, just a little bit of distribution on where our primary projects are located. And it's not letting me exit. Okay, there we go. So I'll just pop right into going into a software demo at this point. So let's start with Storyboard Pro. So Storyboard Pro is where you can actually create some storyboards to plan your production before you do it. And whenever we design technology for storyboarding and animation, we always try to think about how people like to work and then try to create a technology that works that way. And so we really consulted with storyboard artists to find out how they were working traditionally. And then we made a technology where they could continue to work the same way, but they could now work faster and easier. So, for example, when you're working with a script, you can actually import your script directly into here. And we do support Final Draft as a script writing software. You can also import Word documents or PDFs, or type directly in this window. And when you have a script imported, we can select the text from the different, let's say, character dialogue, for example, and then you can just drag and drop the text from the script window into the captions over here. And captions are a place where you can organize your information. So the types of information that you want to organize will be different depending on the type of production that you do. So for example, if you're doing a 2D production, then you might want to keep track of dialogue and action notes. If you're doing a 3D production, you might also want to keep track of a set list or prop list or things like that. And so you can create your own captions. These are totally customizable. You can add captions, delete captions, or rename captions so that you can really get this exactly how you need it for your production. Then in addition to being able to organize the text information, of course, you can do drawings as well. And when it comes to drawing in Storyboard, you can even do a quick thumbnail drawing directly within this window. And I still like to go through the thumbnailing phase in the beginning because it allows you to use a small constrained sort of area to just quickly lay out what's going to happen in your scene. Then when you're ready to work on it in more detail, you can pop over to the drawing view. And from the drawing view now, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can rotate your workspace. And when it comes to drawings, you do have the ability as well to import drawings in or import images in. So if you do like to work in that sort of traditional way, You can always import some pictures in here, and then you can simply drag and drop them into the scene and vectorize them or not as you'd like to. So you can import images in here and work with them, or you can draw directly in the software. So when it comes to drawing directly in the software, of course, this is a huge advantage and time saver, but you also do have the ability to draw both in bitmap and in vector. And so bitmap drawings give you this really nice sort of smooth pixel-based type of line that you can draw with. Or you can draw in vector, which gives you a bit more of a clean line. But there's advantages to either one, right? So when you're drawing in bitmap, you have that sort of full control over what it looks like. But if you zoom in far enough, eventually you will see pixels. When it comes to vector lines are really nice and clean. And you do have the pressure sensitivity still, so you can still create a nice looking line, but you do have the ability to move that line around after you draw it, as well as to make changes or adjustments to the size or thickness of those lines. And so it's quite useful with vector lines to do things like backgrounds with vector lines, because if you need to sort of zoom in on one area of your background, you can shrink the size of your lines to make it look nice. So we do have that full suite of drawing tools in here. And most of our customers do draw directly in Storyboard Pro. There's not too many customers that prefer to draw outside and import in, but you do have the ability to do both. So now if we take a look at an example here of what a real storyboard looks like, so we don't have to look at my horrible drawings, then we see here just a few examples of some images. So Storyboard Pro allows you to organize things into scenes and panels. So a scene is when you have something from a new camera angle. You want to switch to a new scene. So I start out with my establishing shot, I go to the next scene, and now this is my 2-shot, and I can go to a different camera angle. Now in this case, I have 2 different panels within a single scene because I need to describe something by having a little bit of animation on there. And so whenever you need to sort of create a couple of different panels, you can create a couple of different panels within the same scene. And then in a scene, you can do a few different things. So I can also select a drawing layer and I can animate this layer. So I can take the starting point and put it off the edge. I can put the ending point and bring it in. And then if I actually check out how this works in the timeline, when I then play through this, I see the animation happening of the character moving into the frame. So layer animation is...
Lily, are you playing through that now?
I was just sort of dragging through. Can you see this?
Oh, I can a little bit, yeah. It's just a bit slow sometimes with the moving images. But okay, so you're dragging through so that you can go from one frame to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Great, yeah.
Great. Okay, so then the next thing you might want to do is do a camera move, right? So when you're doing a camera move, if you're doing a sort of static 2D shot, you can just create some keyframes on your camera, and then you can zoom in and place that where you want it to be. And then now I'll try to drag through really slow so you can see how when I zoom in, now I see that zoom happening. So it's super fast. And you can add as many keyframes on the camera as you need. So you can have keyframes at the beginning and end of your panel, but you can also have keyframes in the middle. So for example, if you want to do a little camera shake, now this one you probably won't be able to see if it's running a bit slow, but you can put as many keyframes as you need to accomplish, for example, something like a camera shake. So then we start to sort of blend the world of 2D and 3D even within the storyboarding space. So this is an example of a scene that's laid out in a 3D space with 2D elements. So you see here that I've created a multiplane directly within the storyboard scene where I have some layers that are in the front and some layers that are in the back. And so by simply placing these layers in 3D space where they belong, when you animate your camera, you'll see them sliding against each other. This is that element that we call parallax. So you can see that parallax effect. Are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. So within Storyboard Pro, we do sort of blend the lines also between drawings and animatics, or storyboards and animatics. So within my storyboard scene, I can go directly into the timeline and I can actually adjust how long something is playing for. And I can also import some sound and work with the sound in here. And when you're working with sound, you have the ability to do some editing directly in here. You can split the clip into 2 different clips and move the pieces around. And then you can also add volume keyframes onto your volume line there so that you can do fade in and fade out effects. And you can sort of mark them different colors as well, which helps to make it easy when you're doing editing so that you can quickly go back and check what you were doing when you're doing revisions and things like that. So then if we just want to take a look at one last scene file here on the storyboard front, then I'll show you an example where we've also imported some 3D models. Oops, that's not the one I want. I want the other one, the key. Okay, so
while you're looking for that, I will mention again, just so everyone's, for those who have joined us, that it's a bit slow because of the Wi-Fi connection, not because of anything wrong with Toon Boom. Just so you, I know Lily's mentioned it, but just so you know. Sorry, carry on, Lily.
Well, hopefully also if this does record properly, we can put it up in a place where you can go back and watch the demo again, hopefully at full speed. That would be the ideal. So let's see if that works. In any case, so directly within my view here, I can also import some 3D models in. So in this case, I've got my car here and I can import, I can reposition, and I can even animate this just like you can animate a 2D layer. So if I want to take this car, I could start the position here and then I could put the end position, out there. And then as I play through, I'll now see the car animating out of the frame. So you can do some basic animations just to sort of place things within your scene, and then you can draw the 2D elements on top, which is really nice because you can still get that storyboarding feeling of being able to really do some nice drawings and work in the same storyboarding way, but just incorporate some 3D elements in here. So then when you're working on a team, if you are working with multiple different storyboard artists or maybe a storyboard artist and an editor, then you do have the ability also to do what we call project management. So you can split a storyboard project into multiple different sub-projects. Different people can work on them, and then you can merge them back together again, and you can even merge and replace when you're doing revisions so that you can replace an existing scene with an updated version. So we're definitely thinking about how you can work on teams with this software. And the most important thing actually about Storyboard Pro is what are you going to do next? Because if you think about it, when you're working with storyboarding, you're always planning for something, right? You're planning a production. And so the most important thing is how can you take what you've planned and then go to the next step? And so we have a variety of different export formats to help with that. If you simply want to extract the images out, then you can export to bitmap and then just extract the images. One of the really interesting ones is the export to CSV. So if you are doing production tracking, you can also export your project to Excel. And then from within Excel, you can check how many frames are in each scene and how many frames are in each panel, as well as being able to extract out the drawing names and whether there's a camera move in that scene or not. All of this information is useful for planning your production so that you know what stage you're at, how long it's going to take to animate it, and so on. Then in addition to production tracking, you may also want to actually export out your PDF. So we do have a variety of different formats that are sort of preset formats that we use when we export a PDF. But you can also take one of these formats and make it your own. So you can add your own logo and you can customize it to the layout that works for your production. And so a basic storyboard consists of the image on the left-hand side and then some, captions that have information in them on the right. And so you get all of the information that you need for the durations, and then you can then use this storyboard to send it to somebody who you're going to be working with, or just to simply print it out in-house and take a look at it and put it on the wall or whatever it is that you want to do with your storyboard. Now, because you can do the animatic as well directly within Storyboard Pro, you may also want to export a movie out. So you can not only export movies at full size, you can choose to do it at half or quarter size if you're just testing things out. And then you can also print the time code on there. You can print some additional information on there, and you can print a project safety. And so you can get all of the information that you need directly from within that exported movie. Then if you are going to be working on editing your project in an editing software such as Premiere, Final Cut, or Avid, you can export and rebuild your timeline in those softwares. So usually when you do your final edit, if you're going to go and do production, you'll do it in something like Premiere or maybe Avid. And so you can export your timeline from your storyboard, rebuild the timeline, and this becomes the first basis for your working edit. And then as you're editing, you can simply lay on the final animation or the final production, if it's a live action production or whatever it is, directly on top. Now, if you are going to do animation, then you can export to Toon Boom to do 2D animation, or you can also export to FBX if you're doing 3D animation. So when you export to Toon Boom, just to show you an example of this, what's nice is that you can export to Harmony, which is the animation software I'm going to show you in a minute. But what it will do is it will create for you all of the scene files that you need. And then within those scene files, it will import all of the storyboard information. So you'll have the drawings, the sound, and the scene will be set to the correct length. Now, in a lot of productions that are not using storyboard, this is actually somebody's job, is to go in there and create all the scene files and cut up the animatic and then import the animatic reference footage into those scene files. Now, that person can be retasked to doing more productive things than just creating these, because it's just poof, automatically created for you. So now if I go into the animation, actually maybe stop for a second and just say, are there any questions on Storyboard Pro?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions for this stage, so storyboard goes up to an animatic phase. It includes sound, 3D elements, you can use it for games. Anybody have any questions about how it's used or how they might like to use it? It's a tough crowd, Lily. I think they're interested.
Well, you can hold your questions if you want, and then ask them at the end as well.
Okay.
All right, I'll keep going then. Okay, so moving now into Harmony, which is our animation software. One of the nice things about Harmony is that you can do basically any style of animation that you want to do. And I'll show you a couple of examples of some different styles, but we'll start with that traditional kind of frame-by-frame drawing, and then I'll work my way up to cutout. But before I get started with that, let's take a look at how you can draw directly in Harmony. So when you're drawing in Harmony, just like with Storyboard Pro, we do also allow you to draw in vector or in bitmap. And so this example is an example with vector lines and vector color. And so the advantage of drawing in vector, and when it comes to the lines and the color, is that I do have the ability to move the lines around after I draw them. Or when it comes to color, I do also have the ability to come in here and make changes. So I can just color pick, let's say, one of the colors on here. And then if I need to make a change, if I make that change, you see that the change applies immediately. I don't have to do any additional work, and it will change on all of the frames that use that drawing. So using vector lines and vector color is the most lightweight way of working, and it's also the most flexible for changes. But there are some cases or circumstances where you might want to do different types of lines. And so we do also support drawing in bitmap. So this is an example of something where the color is still drawn in vector, but the lines are done in bitmap. And so if you want that really sketchy quality, but you still want to have the flexibility of adjusting the color palettes later, then you can do that. Then if you want to do both or you want to do the lines in vector and then the color in bitmap, then you can do this as well. So in this case, you're taking advantage of bitmap to do some really cool shading effects. But with your lines, you still have the ability to adjust the thickness of the lines, for example, based on the distance of the camera. And the last example is totally bitmap for line and fill. And so if you're really going for that digital painting that moves kind of style, then this would be totally bitmap, and you can do this as well. So stylistically speaking, there's no limitations to using Harmony. You can do any style that you like. Now, coming back to just a little bit more on the pencil lines, then I showed you the pencil lines in Storyboard Pro a minute ago. So this is an example of the typical pencil line as it is in Flash, where you have a uniform thickness on the line. It works very well for being able to manipulate the lines, but it doesn't look very pretty. So in Toon Boom, we added, first of all, the ability to do thick and thin. And so you see immediately that as soon as you add the thick and thin on the lines, it makes the lines look much, much nicer. So here's the previous with no thickness, and then the version with thickness. And then we also have the ability to put a texture on the line. The way that we do texture is quite unique, because what we do is we tile the texture along the length of the line and in the direction of the line. And so as I make changes to the lines, the texture follows those changes and it still works well. Then the other thing is I can actually paint, and what happens when I paint is that it actually paints all the way up to the center of the drawing. I'll just turn on a little close gap there because it looks like I have a bit of a gap in that line. So you see that when I paint, it paints all the way to the center, and that's because a pencil line is defined by the center line. And so, there's my little gap. Let's close that gap up. So as I paint this guy, it paints all the way to the center of the line. And then the other thing that's kind of nifty about this is that I can come in here at any time and I can change the style of my line, or I could use a new texture on that line. So if I want to apply different textures, you see that the different textures still work. I'll even go all the way to the dashed example or the gray and squares example, because you can see that even with a drastically different texture, because it paints all the way to the center of the line, the paint or the fill region will always work. And so this means it gives you flexibility to decide at any point in time what type of texture you want to use on your lines. So then we can see the last example here where the texture or where the fills are completely filled in on this example. So even though it's textured lines, I do have the ability to change the style of the lines at any time. So zipping along from drawing to doing some animation now, if we start out with a very simple storyboard example. So when you import your storyboard in, you might just have a couple of panels indicating what's happening in that scene. And if you're doing a frame-by-frame animation, then the next step in the process is to do a rough layer. And so your rough layer may consist of a few extra drawings where you're just sort of doing some construction and you're really breaking this apart. We do also have the ability to work in the drawing view as well. So if you think about it, the drawing view is where you can sort of work on an individual layer, but you do have the ability to flip on the light and see your source layers underneath it. So this is very similar to how you would work on paper, is with this sort of drawing view. What the camera view lets you do is it lets you look at all the layers with their transforms on them, with the camera moves on them. If I then look at the next step in the process, then the next step will be to create your clean lines. And so just like in the example I showed a minute ago, you'll want to use probably pencil lines so that you can get that nice thick and thin, but still be able to move the lines around. And then you can color those lines in. And so when we look at the colored example, we do have the ability to split the lines and the color fill onto their own sublayers within that drawing. So it makes it easy to keep the lines separated in case you want to do, for example, special effects on your lines. You can get some really interesting looks and feels. And like I mentioned before, when it comes to color, let's just pop this open again so that I can take a look at the color. So if I do change the color on here, you see that even though I do have several different frames of animation, that all of those frames get adjusted at the same time. And when you're working on a production where you have many different scene files, you can also link all of the different scene files to one central palette so that when you make adjustments or changes that it is adjusted across all of the scene files that you're using. So then when you're doing shadows, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. So the traditional way of doing shadows would be to draw them directly on the drawing so that you can come in here and just draw them out. So you can still do the traditional drawing route, but there's other ways that you can do the shadow as well, which is a little bit more using special effects, and it saves you a lot of time. So I'll just do a little intro to special effects in Harmony now. Let me get rid of all of these extra drawing layers that I have in here. So when we're working in Harmony, we work with a node-based compositing system built in. So if you're familiar with software like Nuke or like Fusion, then these are node-based compositing softwares just like ours. So when we're working in the software, we have the ability to extract out or to look at the drawing layers as modules in this network view. So if I want to do a shadow on this character, rather than painstakingly drawing the shadow on there, I can simply draw the region where I want the shadow to take place. And I'm just going to do this super messy. And then I can use an effect to connect together that shadow to my drawing. So when it comes to shadows, we actually call this a tone to differentiate it from a drop shadow. And then I can connect that and that shadow that I drew into the tone module. And we see a bit of a preview in this view of what that shadow will look like, but I can also pop it off for a quick render to see the final view there. And I will just add a white background behind everything so that you can see where that character actually is. And then the fun thing about this is if you use your effect to draw your shadow, then it means that you have a separate control over what the shadow looks like. So for example, if I want it to be very blurry, Princess and the Frog style, I can do a very blurry shadow, or I can do a very sharp cell shaded style just by adjusting the properties in my effect. Then you can also use the effect to define the different colors. So for example, if it's outside in a cool area, you might want to have a bit of blue in there. If you're inside by the fireplace, you might want to have a more warm shadow. And then you can also animate everything that has this little function icon next to it can be animated over time. So if you have a character in front of a flickering fireplace, you can actually animate the color using some animation curves, and then you can get the effect that you want. And if it doesn't look 100% correct, you can always tweak the function curves rather than starting from scratch and having to repaint anything. We don't like repainting here at Toon Boom. We want to do the least amount of repainting. And so we can do it directly using the effect. So keeping all of that in mind, that brings you all the way to the end of that traditional process, that frame by frame process. But these days, a lot of companies are doing cutout characters rather than actually drawing everything frame by frame. So this is just a simple example of a nice cutout character. This is from a studio called Guru. And so you can split a cutout character up into different pieces, and then you can animate the different pieces around. I mean, this is basically how cutout works, right? So you can go up the chain, and then you can animate all the way up the chain. And so it just makes it faster because rather than animating each frame by scratch, you can just reposition the elements. And then within a single layer, you also do have the ability to have many different drawing substitutions. So you can build a library of hands, of mouths, and then you can just swap these in as necessary. So as I swap the different mouths in, I can also use the lip sync tool to apply the lip sync on this character, or I can simply go in there and manually swap the drawings depending on the look and feel that I'm going for. And so if I just sort of play back through this little scene here, just showing the animation without showing the sound. Oh, of course, you can't see the playback properly at speed. But the animation does look very nice, even though it's just a simple cutout character. So then if we go up and start looking at some more sophisticated cutout characters, this is an example of a cutout character that's built using a tool called Deform. And so if you haven't seen Deform yet, then Deform is basically giving you the ability to bend or warp drawings. So if we take a look at this girl, you see her torso here has a texture on it. If you've ever tried to animate something with a texture and make it bend, it's actually really hard, even in frame by frame animation, to make this look good. Because when something is bending, to actually paint a region and bend it is really difficult. So cutout is actually one of the only ways that you can get a really nice looking texture to work. So if we take a look at this rig, then the skirt is actually spreading apart and the torso is actually animated. So I can take the torso and I can move it around, and then you see how the texture on the torso bends with her movement. And so it gives you a really nice look and feel at the end of the day. But she's still rigged like a traditional cutout character. You can still, come in here and animate the bones around of the individual elements. And then she's also got some simple curves on her hair, so I can come in here and just bounce the hair around really easily. Curved deformers like this are great for hair. They're great for changing the shape of the face. And then they're also great for doing things like tails. When it comes to making more sophisticated cutout characters, there's also masking, which comes in super handy. And we see a lot, almost all character rigs in Toon Boom are built with masking. So masking can be used in things like eyes. They can be used in the mouth to animate the tongue within the mouth. But you can still swap the mouth layer on top of that. And so you get that sophisticated animation without having to worry about when you're going to animate something off the edge. So combining together masking, deform, plus the traditional sort of swapping and animation tools from cutout is where you get the really nice looking rigs. So I'll pop in this little scene here that actually was animated in Ireland, so not too far from you guys. And this scene file, we can sort of send you the YouTube link for you to check it out on YouTube as well afterwards to see the final animated version. But this guy is actually crazy cool. So if we take a look at his rig, I can't really play back at speed because it's a little bit slower over there. But he's actually a cutout character, and you'd never guess from looking at him that he's animated and cutout. So let me astound you by showing you how crazy sophisticated this rig is. Woo! So, I mean, they really went the whole 9 yards with this one. But
Wow.
if we actually are animating this, you're not going to look at all of those at the same time. The way that you'll animate when you're working with a really nice character like this is you'll simply select the piece that you want to animate, turn on the bone for that piece, and then you can come in here and animate it. But you can see how I can easily sort of change the shape of his face, right? I can come and I can change the shape of all of these different elements simply by dragging on the curves. And then I can animate the pieces of the mouth around within the mouth. I can animate the shape even of his lips. So you can really do some fun facial expressions. I mean, when we talk about facial expressions, this guy is animated to the T for great facial expressions. I love using curves on eyebrows. There's so much that you can do with curves on eyebrows, and then you don't have to have a library of 30 different eyebrows. You just need one, and then you just animate the curve around. And the nice thing about animating with curves and deforms as well is that it interpolates perfectly from one keyframe to another. So if you have drawing swaps in your library and you have 30 different drawing swaps of eyebrows, every time you swap from one drawing to another, it's like a hard cut. But when you do a curve and then I have a position here and then I have a position there and I spread those two positions out by 5 frames, then it's really going to interpolate perfectly from one frame to the other. And so this is how you can get some really nice looking animations even when you're working in the cutout space. And when we look at some examples like this example, of course, but when you're also looking at examples like Disney's Jake and the Neverland Pirates, which was animated at Mercury, then these examples are so sophisticated that you can't even tell that they're animated in cutout. And they can not only save time by doing it this way, but they can also maintain a consistent quality across different animators. So that if you're working with a team of animators, then if they're all using the same character rigs, chances are they're all going to be doing the same level of quality now. So I'll just breeze through a couple other things because I'm going to have to check out here pretty soon. But just to show you a few effects and a few of the other features. So within Harmony, we do also have a full effects system built in here. And so this is just a little scene where this guy's coming in here. And when you actually render this scene out, then you can start to see some of the effects that are applied on there. So you can have what we call a turbulence module to animate things like sand or like waves. And that's applied here to the sand, and it's actually animated, so it makes it look like the sand is sort of moving over time. You can have glow effects so that these pillars can be glowing. You can have motion blur effects on there. But one of the things that are really fun to use now is particles. So the way that we do particles in Toon Boom is that we actually let you draw your own particles. You can use any one of the preset examples that we have in there, but if you do want to sort of draw your own particle, then what's fun about this is you can draw your drawing directly within Harmony. And then when you see your particle system, it's going to use these drawings. So just to prove to you that I'm doing that, I'm going to put a black dot on there. So you see, as soon as I apply that black dot, it applies within the particle scene as well. So it's constantly referencing your drawings, so you can make whatever changes or adjustments that you want to, and then it's applied immediately in your particle scene. And then the particle scene does exist within a 3D space as well. So if I kind of just zoom throughout my space here, you can see how the different leaves are laid out in space in the perspective view. And so it will also keep those particles so that they're always facing the camera so that you don't get that sort of odd looking 2D particle thing. So then just a couple other quick examples. Here's some smoke. And then we'll show, let's get these out of here. Whoop. Just remove those there. And then I've got some snow here. So this snow also has some wind applied to it. So a particle system consists of some drawings, but it also consists of adding some actions into that scene. So you could have gravity, you can have wind, you can have a bounce plane if you need the particles to sort of bounce off of different things. This example here is showing some sparkly magic, so you can sort of animate the position of where the particles are being created over time. And then I'll show you a last example here with the raindrops. The raindrops example is kind of nice because you see how you can have the rain falling, but then you can also have the raindrops at the bottom to create a really nice looking rain if you do see the sort of plane where the rain is animated onto. So then a couple of last things. One thing that I just want to show you really quick is that we do have the ability to import 3D models in, and we play best with Maya. So if you're using Autodesk Maya, then you can not only import the drawings or the models in, but you can also render directly through Maya using Toon Boom. And so when you import your 3D models in, I can sort of maneuver and work with the 3D models within this space, but I can also have 2D character elements, and then I can animate all of these guys over time. And so if I have an animation, then I'll see that animation being applied here. And let's just see if I already have a camera in there. So now I can see when I have a camera move how easy it is for me to work within this scene. And when it comes to 2D character elements, we can also keep our 2D elements so that they're always facing the camera. And this is an effect that we call the ortho lock. So when the ortho lock is on, then the character is always facing the camera. You don't have to worry about having to track your 2D elements within your 3D scene. So just to give you a last little bit here on gaming. So we do also have, I mentioned earlier, the ability to take animations from Harmony and then export them to Unity. So I'll just show you a couple examples of some game rigs. So this example here is this little space duck. And so you do have the ability to create some nice simple character rigs within Harmony, and then you can animate using the same animation tools that I showed you earlier. We just added the support for deform, so you can now use bones to rig your character elements in here. And then you can also create different animation sets. And so, for example, if I have an idle and then I can have a run for the same character, then I can create these various different animation sets and I can export all of them to Unity. And if you're really interested in learning more about the gaming pipeline, then there's definitely, a lot that I can talk about on that front, but I could talk about that for an hour as well. So just to pop open a couple other examples, this cute little sheep here that's just doing its simple little idle. And then if I pop in the horse example as well, then what's interesting about the horse, just stick him over here, is that the horse is animated also with a deform on the tail. And so you can create deforms on your drawing elements, animate these over time, and then all of this animation will be properly exported to Unity. And you can generate sprite sheets from this animation and all that fun stuff. So that was Harmony in a really quick nutshell, just sort of going over various different things. I think I'll probably stop my presentation here and open it up for any questions.
So anybody have any questions about Harmony in particular?
Well, no harm. I mean, I use Animate Pro. I have to admit, I think it's Animate Pro 2, but I'm interested in curves. Would you be introducing that to Animate Pro?
Well, actually, I think you should definitely stay tuned in the next few months because we are revisiting or relooking at our product line. And so I can't say for sure exactly what's going to happen. But I think that like Animate Pro 3 introduced the bone deformer in it. So Animate Pro currently does not have curves, it only has bones. But going forward, I think what we're going to see is that we will still sort of offer different levels of the software that has different features within them to offer things at different price ranges. But if you are an individual, you can still also take advantage of Harmony. Harmony is not just for studios, it's also for freelancers and individuals. And so we do have a standalone version of Harmony as well.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, this example on the dress of the car, does it work as well in the Pro, or is it only for Harmony?
So Lily, I don't know if you heard that. That was the example of the dress being rigged up to work in Animate Pro as well.
Yeah, so the dress on that character was actually animated only with bones, and so theoretically, yes, you could do that. When it comes to the rest of the character, she did have some elements on her that were animated with curves. So the dress itself, though, I think was only rigged with bones.
A couple of quick questions for you while you're here. So can you, do you think you can fake a 3D production or a 3D look using Toon Boom with some of the bones and some of the structures you showed us in that last video clip, the black and white one?
Well, ironically enough, I think most of the time it's 3D productions that are trying to simulate 2D rather than the other way around. You see a lot of productions that are done in 3D and toon shaded. These sorts of productions are more what you would do in Toon Boom. So when you want to do things where you're importing 3D elements in, then you really want to do character animation in 2D, and then you can use 3D objects to do things like, backgrounds and props. But when it comes to making things look 3D, then stylistically speaking, most of the time still we see people doing flat looking characters, but we can do a full 3D rotation on a 2D character now. You can see on the rigs that they do at Mercury. Mercury does a lot of the productions for Disney TV. They actually do a full 360 turnaround, but only using keyframes. And so we don't rig things anymore in that, like, traditional 2D stuff is rigged with a front view, a 3/4 view, and a side view and a back view. So instead of doing views like that, we just do one view and then we animate, and then we mask elements, and we use special effects to just be able to rotate them around. And then there's other new stuff that's on the way for some cool 3D lighting effects that we're going to see probably in the next version of Harmony. So we're going more and more along the direction of working within the 3D space, but you know, it just depends on the look and feel of the production that you're doing.
Well, that's fantastic. I know we saw a few productions at MidCon that were 2D with live action backgrounds, but that's simply a case of using a live action background as a video frame, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Anybody else have any questions? Oh yeah, we've got 3 more. Make them quick. Yeah. Go ahead.
A lot of the TV stuff, the kids' TV stuff at the moment, is a lot about texture. Is there any way to texture the colours as well?
Texturing, Lily? Did you hear that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of productions now that are using texture, and actually, if you look at some of the new stuff that's coming from Disney TV, they were only able to do this because of Toon Boom's technology. So the 2 things that are really the most important for doing texture, I'm going to do a really stupid example on the side so that you can see this. And I'll do this in vector. I mean, you don't have to do it in bitmap when you're doing texture, although you can if you like. But let's do a simple rectangle, and I'll put a textured line on my rectangle so that you can see this here. Whoop, let me just get a different color in there. Okay, what have I done? I don't know what I've done. I've lost my entire thing. So, well, there's 2 things that are really important when it comes to texture. So the textured lines that I was showing you with the pencil tool, and then being able to fill those line areas with a texture or a gradient. So you can fill things in with a texture or gradient, and it can be a tiled texture. And then if you take that textured line plus the texture fill, and then you apply a curve or a bone deform on top of it, then you can actually animate pretty much anything that you want to.
So the texture follows the bone structure.
Exactly, sort of similar to the example that I was showing you with the girl with the dress. That one I can pop up again.
And your question?
Okay. I was wondering if you could go through the main differences between Harmony and
Storyboard?
and Pro.
Oh, okay. Main differences between Harmony, Storyboard, and Animate.
So Storyboard Pro is its own software for doing the planning or the pre-production in the beginning. So it's not a full animation solution. It's more for planning out the entire production. And normally with Storyboard Pro, you'll plan out all of the scenes within the single software. So if I check my storyboard example for the Minotaur project here, then you'll see that you have all of the different scenes, and the storyboard project can be quite long as well. These can go, I mean, you can have the entire 22-minute episode for television within a single storyboard file. So you're planning the entire episode. And then when it goes to animation, it doesn't really make too much of a difference in terms of whether it's Anime Pro or Harmony. But when it goes to animation, what you're doing is you're working on discrete scene files. So I'm going to work on a single scene file at a time within the animation software. I'm not working on the entire production. I'm just working on a single scene file at a time. So that's the main sort of difference between Storyboard Pro and Harmony. And then when you get into the differences between Animate Pro and Harmony, then it's just a simple matter of feature comparison. So what we did was we released a line that has Animate and then Animate Pro and then Harmony in increasing levels of complexity with increasing feature sets. So the way that I like to sort of just lay it out in a very simple way is if you're doing frame by frame animation and you're not doing any effects, then Animate is enough for you. If you're doing simple cutout, so not too much of the deform stuff, not too much texture stuff, just simple cutout, Animate Pro will do the job. And Animate Pro does also come with a library of special effects. But if you're doing advanced special effects and advanced cutout rigs, then Harmony has the full tool set. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll take one more question. Yeah.
Can you hear me there? You can push the microphone.
I think I can hear you.
This is going back a bit, but I tried, I think it was animated a while ago. One of the problems I had with it was when I was rigging up the character and doing all the parenting and all of this, I was finding that the parenting was kind of mixed up together on timeline with the display order. So once I have all the layers set up in the right display order, and I do the parenting, I find that that's adopted my display order. Is there a way to deal with the parenting without it affecting the display order while still doing the timeline? I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, so just to repeat the question to make sure I got it, then you're talking about when you parent elements in the timeline, that sometimes it changes the order that they appear in your camera, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically when it comes to animate is limited to a timeline view only. So in Harmony, I was showing you guys a little bit how we have this view called the network view. And in Animate, we don't have this network view. We just have the timeline only. So what happens is that, and this is actually a similar issue that you might have if you work in other animation softwares like Flash, that when you have something like a timeline, what they do in Flash actually is different because they sort of nest symbols inside other symbols. But if you're working in the timeline in something like Harmony, then we simply drag and drop an element on top of another element. And the display order by default comes in terms of the thing that is on the top in the timeline appears in front in the camera. And so sometimes when you drag and drop one layer onto another layer, for it to become a child, it moves in the back. So there's two things that you can do that can solve the issue if you still want to stay in Animate. The first thing is, instead of dragging and dropping one drawing layer on top of another layer, if you create peg layers for each ones of your drawings. So you guys sound like you know a little bit about Toon Boom already, so I don't necessarily have to explain what a peg is, but you have a peg layer that can sort of control the position of that element. So if I have, a couple of different drawings and I want to parent one drawing to the other, rather than simply dragging one directly on top of the other, what you can do is you can create another peg, and then you can drag them both onto the same peg, so that this peg is controlling the parent. And when you do it this way, you can actually reorder those drawing elements in your timeline without having any issues of display. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you can also nudge the elements forward and backward using a keyframe. So because we have the Z depth happening, we do have the ability to use our transform tool to add keyframes on the Z to nudge it just a little bit forward or just a little bit backward. Now, the reason that you don't hear about this problem as much in Animate Pro and Harmony is because of this network view. And so within the network view, even though it may look slightly intimidating at the beginning because it's got this, in the case of these characters, they're quite sophisticated. So you see that they have lots and lots of modules. So it might look a little bit intimidating when you first take a look at it. But what's interesting about this is that you can reorder the pipes in your composite without changing the parent-child relationships. So that what the composite does is the composite gathers together all of the different drawings and displays them. And so the parent-child relationships actually in the network are defined on the top by connecting one peg layer into another one. Then it becomes the parent of that one. But the display is controlled on the bottom. So you can actually adjust the display without changing the parent-child relationships. Now, this is what makes the network view very, very powerful as a solution, but it's a little bit intimidating. It's a little bit advanced maybe as a concept. Once people get used to it, though, they never tend to want to go back, eh? Like once you see people that love the network view, they don't want to go back to working in the timeline. But it just sort of takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's very, very powerful. So it really depends on what kind of work you're doing and what level you want to go at.
Does that help answer your question? Yeah. Thank you so much, Lilly. Can we all please give Lilly a round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sticking with us through the rain and the dark, cold nights. We appreciate it. And
well, I'm really glad you all made it.
I'll be in touch soon and follow up. on email. Okay.
Great. Sounds great. Have a great rest of your evening, and
Okay.
you know, drink a pint for me.
We will.
Another round of applause, I should say.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Well, I think this is the right point to have a short interval, about 10-15 minutes. As I keep telling everyone, we get this room for free, so please go.